is the one day this week that I'm even gonna think about the sourdough, and I'm gonna show you how you can make dough one day during the week and actually have fresh loaves, pizza dough, all of the goodness that you want for the rest of the week and even into next week if you do this one thing I'm gonna show you. So the thing about sourdough is that once we make the dough, which I'm gonna show you how to do it, this dough can go straight into the fridge and it can actually stay in the fridge for up to 10 days before we ever do any baking with it. So this isn't like, I'm gonna make 15 loaves of bread today and then they have to go in the freezer. No. All we're doing today is making the dough. It's gonna go into the fridge in a big tub, I'll show you in a bit, and then the dough sits in there and it proofs. And honestly, the more days that you can give it to proof in the fridge, the better the flavor is. And I spend my time on Mondays usually making a couple big batches of dough for our own fresh bread, or if we wanna have sourdough pizza for Friday, it goes into the fridge and I don't have to think about making any dough for the next 10 days. So today I'm gonna show you how I make a double batch. This is only for making 2 big loaves, which for most families, that's about all we would use in a week because we don't eat it every single day. So the recipe is down in the description. Also, all the links, anything that I talk about, it's all down in the description. If you are just getting started with sourdough and you're thinking, I'm so confused about the starter and how do I feed it and what's discard, I did some other videos on that. Check out the sourdough playlist. There's all sorts of goodness in there. And we're sharing stuff every week. As I'm making our own sourdough, I'm sharing with you what we're doing because I love helping you realize how easy it can be. It wasn't until I realized that my sourdough starter could live in the fridge and that I could make big batches of dough one day that I realized, oh, I do like making sourdough. I just don't like being a slave to sourdough. So if you feel the same as me, come and bake with me. We're gonna have fun. So the first thing that we need to do is we're actually going to check that our starter is ready to bake with. And the easiest way to do that, to check that your starter is ready to bake with, well, number one, do you see that? This is such happy starter. I fed it last night. So yesterday I took my starter out of the fridge. It was cold in the fridge. Put 50 grams in this jar with 200 grams of water, 200 grams of flour, and then it has been resting and rising overnight. Now it's time to bake, and I know, okay, this is ready because it has doubled in size and it's about to come out of the jar. That's my sign that it's ready. But if you aren't sure if yours is ready, put a little drop of your sourdough starter in a cup of water. If it floats, it means that your starter is ready. If your starter is not doubling in size like this when you feed it, go back to my video on how do you feed your starter, and it's gonna give you a bunch of tips on what might be happening there. But this is all ready to go. Now what we're gonna do is I'm turning on my scale and I'm gonna bring you over here so you can see what I put in the bowl. If you don't already have a scale, this is essential to doing sourdough. Almost all sourdough recipes are going to be listed in grams. So when you turn your scale on, make sure that you click through the units and that you have it on grams, because this is the number that you are tracking as you pour the different ingredients in. So for our double batch of dough, I need 300 grams of sourdough starter, which is going to be most of this jar. And we're gonna just pour in. This is why I love using the scale. It is so much easier than having to count through cups and like, did you do enough cups? And then you think, oh my word, did I do 3 cups or 4 cups? So I got a little too much in there. Just gonna take a little out. Oh, there we go. We are almost at exactly 300 grams. It's okay if it's a couple grams over. That's not gonna do anything bad to the bread. And we'll talk in a minute about what to do with your extra sourdough starter, because you can see that there is some extra starter in our jar. Don't get rid of that. We're going to use that in a minute. But the first thing we put into our bowl is our starter. Then next thing we're going to do is the water. So this is room temperature water, and we use just our like filtered water from our tap because we are on an aquifer, and so I know it's all clean. There's no chlorine and stuff. If you feel like your water tastes really chlorinated, then I suggest that you get some, like buy some bottled water so that you don't have that chlorine flavor in your bread. But you get to make that decision. Okay, now we're at 900 because we added 300 grams of sourdough starter to 600 grams of water. And this is my Danish dough whisk. When I'm making the dough in my bowl like this, I love using my Danish dough whisk. It is so helpful, but I'll do another video to show you that yes, you can use your stand mixer to make sourdough bread, and we'll do that in another video. But today we're using our Danish dough whisk. The link to this is below as well. Now what I'm gonna do, because I don't wanna add all of it, I'm actually gonna tare it. So on your scale, it will say tare. That means that it's going to zero it out. Now it's at 0, and now we can put our flour in and not have to add. So we actually need 900 grams of flour, and this recipe is down in the description so you can follow along with it down there. But we're gonna get our 900 grams of flour in, and then we're gonna stop and we're gonna get that all mixed up. One of the things that I did not realize when I first started making sourdough is that it's actually very important to allow the water, flour, and starter to have a chance to hang out together before we do anything else. Okay, 900 grams. I'm gonna take it off the scale for a minute so I can really mix this and not get stuff on the scale. It's important that you allow this to get mixed together before you add the salt. When the salt goes in there, it just starts to change the chemical makeup of the dough, and it doesn't allow the gluten to really start like absorbing the moisture and working with that starter in the same way. So don't put your salt in yet. First, what we're going to do is get our dough mixed up. And this doesn't have to be perfectly smooth dough. The goal in my mind is that there's just no more big chunks of flour anywhere in the bowl. And then I'll show you the next step. So you can see now it's still very lumpy, clumpy. It's not perfectly smooth dough, that's okay, but there aren't any big clumps of flour. I've pushed the dough around to make sure there's no big clumps of flour, but it's still pretty sticky looking. That's okay. This is going to change as it goes through this first step. And this is the thing about sourdough that everybody thinks, oh, sourdough takes so much time and it's so laborious. But here's the thing, is that most of the time, you're not doing anything. You're just waiting for the sourdough to do its thing. And that allows you to like, go and fold the laundry or go work in the garden or whatever you want to do. Read, I don't know, you choose. But you don't have to be, the sourdough really isn't requiring all of your time. Now that we have all those ingredients, the flour, the water, and the starter are combined, they're mixed together, I'm gonna put my bowl back onto the scale and I'm gonna tare it. And I'm going to add 23 grams of salt just to the top. I'm not going to mix this in. It's just going to sit on the top of the bread. And I go pretty slow as I do this to make sure that I don't accidentally, oh, there we go over. Now, our salt is sitting on top of the bread, and I'm gonna take my scale away, get my clean towel, and we're just going to cover our bowl. And now our dough is resting. We have 30-ish minutes, 30 minutes to an hour. Just remember, sourdough is very ish time frame, okay? So when it says 30 minutes, if you didn't come back to do anything with this dough for 40 minutes, It's okay. Now, I wouldn't leave it sitting here for hours on end on a hot summer day, but set your timer for 30 minutes and then come back, and we're going to knead that salt into the dough. But for now, it's just going to rest here. And this is how I make multiple batches of dough on Mondays, and then it gets to rest in the fridge. Because now what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna get my next bowl out, and I'm actually gonna get the pizza dough going. I'll do another video on that so you can go straight to that when you wanna make pizza dough. But if you wanna make multiple batches of different kinds of dough, do it all on the same day. You have all of the starter here ready to go. Use it. When you do it all in one big batch, it actually shortens the amount of time that it takes because everything's already out. You're already in the mode. When we get to the stretch and fold, it's not a big deal to stretch and fold 2 bowls instead of 1. So this is how I do all of the dirty work on one day, and then we have fresh bread and fresh sourdough pizza dough for the rest of the week. Now, look at this. We have extra sourdough starter. Don't throw this out. Put it all together. And I think my jar in the fridge is actually pretty full. Otherwise, I would just add it to that. You can add sourdough, like extra starter from this batch to what's in the fridge, and just keep adding to it whenever you have a little bit left over. I don't keep this on the counter because I don't need to do any more baking this week. I don't need any more activated starter, and so I want to put it away because I don't want to have to think about it. So I'm going to clean up this mess, and in about 30 minutes we're going to come back and we're going to mix that salt into our dough. Now that the dough is all mixed up, we're going to go into the process of autolyse and then stretch and fold. And essentially what that means is the dough is resting, and we're going to come and agitate it every 30 minutes. And we're going to do that 4 times. This doesn't take a whole lot of time, but it does require you to be around, which is why I normally do it in the evening when we're just home. I'm doing laundry, or we're playing a game, or just taking care of life, and I'm around the house. And so I just set a timer for every 30 minutes so that I can come and do that process. So I'll bring you along with me as we do that. Don't worry, I'm not gonna make you wait a whole 2 hours to stretch and fold, but you'll see it really only takes like 2 minutes each time you come back. But here's the thing about sourdough that is different. When you do a yeasted dough, like, can you hear it? The laundry's going right now. That's what it is. It's like you're doing life around your house, and then you come and you take care of one part of the sourdough process. But yeasted dough, the goal would be that you get all those ingredients mixed together fast, which is why you're kneading it and kneading it and kneading it, and you're getting that yeast worked through all of the dough because you want that yeast to activate all of it so that it will rise. The way that sourdough works is think about how long it took for the starter to double in size once you fed it. You're essentially doing the exact same thing when you make your dough for your bread or your pizza or focaccia or whatever recipe you're making. You're needing that starter to have time to work its way all through the dough. So this is why the process is different than yeasted dough, and it takes longer because we really are just waiting for the process to happen. And the way that we help it happen is by doing the stretch and fold, because we're slowly like pulling it through the dough. But what I've found, especially if you're gonna use your stand mixer, like your KitchenAid mixer on the counter, it's really easy to over mix sourdough because you're thinking of like the yeasted dough, and that's not how this acts. And so if you're gonna use your KitchenAid mixer, be careful not to overmix it. Okay, it's been 30 minutes. I want you to look at this. The salt is just sitting on top of the bread. I like to use the Himalayan salt. I like the flavor of it. It's also beautiful, but honestly, once it's mixed into the bread, you don't see it. And now I'll bring you over here so you can see what we do next. I actually just put a little bit of water on my hands. We do not want to incorporate any more flour into our dough in any of the stages, because then it basically begins that sourdoughing process again, and we don't want it to start again. So if it's sticking to your hands, just put a little bit of water onto your hands As you saw, I just was like pushing the salt into the dough, and this is what is going to be considered the first of our stretch and folds. And you can do this in your stand mixer as well, but you can see you don't need to be doing a ton. The majority of the work, like if you think of like a traditional bread, how you would knead it, the majority of that like kneading process, we don't actually do for sourdough. The way that the bread comes together is by it resting together for longer. So I've gone around the whole bowl, I've stretched and folded it, and now it's going to rest again. I gotta go find my towel and we're gonna cover it up. Cover and set your timer for 30 minutes. It's time for stretch and fold number 2. I just went and got a little bit of water on my hands. I'm doing the same thing, pulling it up. I'm gonna work my way around the bowl. You're gonna see, this is gonna take maybe 5 minutes if you include washing your hands before and after. Then, so look, when you get your hands wet, it barely sticks to your hands. If yours is really, really sticky, everybody's house is different. And so the next time that you make this, what I want you to do is actually use just a little bit less water and see. The other thing is, if yours is really, really sticky, you might be over mixing it. So just remember, the sourdough itself is gonna do all the work of working its way through the dough. You're just helping a little bit by stretching and folding. Okay, now set your timer. We'll be back for stretch and fold number 3 in a little bit. Stretch and fold number 3. Get my hands wet, stretch, and fold. Give it a wiggle, and I'll show you the bowl because I just want you to see that there is some dough remains still stuck on the sides of the bowl, but look at the dough is becoming softer. There's not as many lumps in it. That's because the sourdough is working its magic. It's working its way through the bowl. So this is the last one. Back to answering emails while the sourdough rests, and then I'll show you how I put it in the fridge. We're on our final stretch and fold, and as I stretch and fold it, I'm going to put it into the bin. This is the bin that I love to put my pizza dough in, my bread dough, because this is for a big batch, and then I just take out what I need for whatever I'm gonna make. So first, get my hands wet. I already washed them. I'm gonna stretch and fold, and you're gonna find that as you get to this last stretch and fold, the dough is going to be even softer. You don't need to do anything in your bin. No oil, flour, nothing like that. Remember, the goal is that we don't add any more flour into this. We want it to only have that flour that was in there initially. And so into the bin it goes. And guess what? This is going into the refrigerator. Now the dough is going to rest in the fridge until we're ready to bake a loaf, and you betcha, I will bring you along when we shape it, when we bake it. I'll show you exactly what we do. Might even make some focaccia bread with it, and I'll show you how to do that too. It's even easier than making a loaf of bread. But leave a comment below. What questions do you have? I love your questions. It helps me to know when I go to do the next step how we can help you to have fun in the kitchen. We love that we get to do life together. And if you want more sourdough fun, check out the whole playlist. We're glad you're here.